They captured her and tied her as payment to the bandits. But he dragged her out and whispered, "Don't look back." And in that moment, she became the only woman he would ever fight the world to keep, Arizona territory. Late summer of 1879, the sun hung low and merciless over the scrubland, turning the dirt to dust and the air to something you could choke on. In the small settlement of Bitter Springs, a town barely worth the name, the heat pressed down like a hand over a mouth. The wooden buildings leaned like drunks against each other, their paint long since stripped by wind and sand. Somewhere a dog barked, hoarse and tired, and the sound died quickly in the thick air. Emma Winslow sat on the ground outside the trading post, her wrists bound with frayed rope that had already rubbed her skin raw. She was 22 years old, though the dirt on her face and the hollow look in her eyes made her seem older, much older. Her dark hair, once pinned neatly in a bun that morning, now fell loose and tangled across her back, catching bits of dust and straw. Her dress, a faded blue cotton that had been her mother's once, was torn at the shoulder where rough hands had grabbed her. She did not cry. She had learned long ago, in harder lessons than this, that tears changed nothing. They only made men laugh. Behind her, voices rose in argument, sharp and ugly. Her uncle, a man named Cyrus Winslow, stood with his hat clutched in both hands, his face red and sweating despite the shade of the porch. His shirt was stained with whiskey and his own fear. Across from him were 3 men on horseback, rough-looking and armed, their eyes cold as river stones in winter. They were outlaws, the kind who drifted through towns like smoke, taking what they wanted and leaving ruin behind. Everyone in Bitter Springs knew their names, whispered them like curses. "We had a deal, Winslow," one of them said. His name was Rake, and he was the worst of them. A scar ran from his temple to his jaw, a souvenir from a knife fight in Tucson. He was known for collecting debts in blood when coin was scarce, and he seemed to prefer it that way. His voice was flat, emotionless, like he was discussing the weather. "You owed us $200. You said you'd have it by now." "That was 3 weeks ago," Cyrus stammered, his voice thin and desperate, the voice of a man who had gambled away his last shred of dignity. "I will, I swear it. Just give me another week, maybe 2. The crops, they didn't come in like I thought. The drought, you see, it killed everything. And the supply wagon from Tucson, it was late, and I couldn't sell what I didn't have. You understand, don't you? I'm good for it, I swear. The drought ain't my problem," Rake said flatly. He leaned forward in his saddle, his gaze shifting slowly, deliberately, to Emma. His eyes crawled over her like insects, and she felt her stomach turn. "But you got something else, don't you? Something that might settle the debt. Something warm and breathin'." Emma felt the weight of his stare like a brand pressed against her skin. She looked away, jaw clenched so tight her teeth ached, heart pounding against her ribs like it was trying to break free. She had known this was coming. For weeks, Cyrus had been desperate, borrowing money from anyone foolish enough to lend it, gambling it away at cards, drinking the rest. When the outlaws came for payment 2 days ago, she had seen the calculation in his eyes. The exact moment he decided she was worth more than his pride, more than any blood tie between them. "She's my niece," Cyrus said weakly, as if that mattered. As if saying the word would change anything. "She's a good worker, strong, quiet. She won't give you trouble. She never has. Honest, she'd do whatever you need." Rake grinned, showing teeth yellowed by tobacco and rot. "We'll take her then. Consider your debt paid, Winslow. Hell, consider it paid with interest." Emma's stomach turned violently. She wanted to scream, to fight, to run as fast and as far as her legs would carry her. But the ropes held her fast, and the men were armed, and there was nowhere to run in this godforsaken town. Cyrus would not meet her eyes. He simply nodded once, quick and cowardly, turned on his heel, and walked back into the trading post without a word, without even a backward glance. The door swung shut behind him with a soft creak that sounded like a coffin closing. One of the other outlaws dismounted, a heavy-set man with a crooked nose and hands like slabs of meat. He grabbed Emma by the arm and hauled her to her feet with no more care than if she were a sack of grain. She stumbled, biting back a cry as the rope bit deeper into her wrists, drawing blood. They dragged her toward the horses, and she could hear the murmur of townspeople watching from doorways and windows, their faces carefully blank, deliberately empty. No one would help her. No one ever did. In Bitter Springs, you minded your own business or you didn't last long. Then, from the far end of the street, came the sound of hooves. A single rider approached, moving slowly, deliberately, like he had all the time in the world. The outlaws paused, their hands drifting instinctively toward their guns. Emma looked up, squinting through the dust and the brutal sunlight that seemed to press down on everything. The rider was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in dark leather and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed most of his face. His horse was a black stallion, powerful and sure-footed, moving with a grace that spoke of careful training and mutual respect. He stopped a few yards away and dismounted with the easy, fluid grace of a man who had spent his entire life on horseback. When he lifted his head and the shadow fell away, Emma saw his face clearly. It was weathered and strong, with high cheekbones and a jaw that looked carved from stone. His eyes were dark, nearly black, and they seemed to see through everything. Through lies and pretense and fear, he was Comanche. She knew it immediately, not just from the beadwork on his vest or the way he wore his hair, but from the way he carried himself with a pride that needed no announcement. His name, she would later learn, was Blackstone, a war chief who had left his people years ago to walk a path between two worlds, belonging fully to neither. He was respected by some, feared by many, and trusted by almost none. White men saw him as a savage trying to play civilized. His own people saw him as a traitor who had abandoned the old ways. He walked alone, and he preferred it that way. Rake shifted in his saddle, his hand resting on the butt of his revolver, fingers twitching. "This ain't your business, Chief." "Keep ridden." Blackstone did not reply immediately. His gaze moved past Rake, past the other outlaws, and settled on Emma. He took in the ropes. The bruises already forming on her arms, the torn dress. The way she held herself like she was bracing for another blow, for the next terrible thing. Something flickered in his eyes, something cold and calculating and utterly unafraid. "How much does she owe you?" he asked. His voice was low and steady, with an accent that made the words sound formal, deliberate. Rake laughed, a harsh sound like gravel being crushed. "She don't owe us nothing. Her uncle did, and he paid with her. That's how debts work out here, Chief. You should know that." Blackstone reached into his coat slowly, keeping his movements visible so no one would get jumpy and start shooting. He pulled out a leather pouch, heavy with weight, and tossed it to Rake, who caught it with one hand. The outlaw opened it, peered inside, and his eyes widened slightly despite his attempt to look unimpressed. "Gold coins, more than enough to cover the debt twice over, maybe 3 times. Take it and leave," Blackstone said. It was not a request. Rake hesitated, his greed warring openly with his pride. He had a reputation to maintain, after all. You couldn't just let an Indian tell you what to do, even if he was paying in gold. The other outlaws exchanged glances, uncertain, waiting for Rake to make the call. Finally, Rake shoved the pouch into his saddlebag and spat into the dirt near Blackstone's boots. "You're buying trouble, Chief." "She ain't worth it. I have bought worse," Blackstone replied, his tone utterly flat. The outlaws turned their horses and rode out, kicking up dust that hung in the air like a dirty curtain. The street fell silent except for the creak of the trading post sign swinging in the hot wind. Emma stood trembling, her wrists still bound, her mind struggling to understand what had just happened. Why this stranger had paid for her, what he would want in return. Men did not do things for nothing. She had learned that too. Blackstone walked toward her, his footsteps quiet despite his size and the hard-packed earth. He pulled a knife from his belt, a long blade that caught the sunlight. And she flinched instinctively, her body remembering every other time a man had come at her with something sharp. "Be still," he said gently, his voice softer than she expected. He cut the ropes with a single swift motion, the blade passing so close to her skin she felt the whisper of it, and the ropes fell away. Emma rubbed her wrists, staring at him, unable to form words. Her throat felt closed, her tongue thick and useless. He leaned close, so close she could smell leather and smoke and something else, something like sage. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Don't look back," she blinked, confused, her mind still trying to catch up. "What? Your uncle sold you once. He will do it again if you stay." "Don't look back," he repeated, and there was something in his voice that sounded like experience, like he knew exactly what he was talking about. Emma's throat tightened painfully. She wanted to argue, to say she had nowhere else to go, that Bitter Springs was all she had left. But the words died on her lips because they were lies and they both knew it. Blackstone was already walking toward his horse. He mounted in one smooth, practiced motion, then extended a hand down toward her. "Come," he said simply. As if it were the most natural thing in the world, she hesitated, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst. Every instinct screamed at her to be afraid, to refuse, to run back into the trading post and beg Cyrus for forgiveness. But where would that get her? Back to Cyrus, who had just handed her over like livestock. Back to a town that had watched her be taken and done nothing, said nothing. She looked at Blackstone's outstretched hand, calloused and scarred from years of hard living, and saw something she had not expected to see in any man's face: certainty, purpose. She took his hand. His grip was firm, but not painful, and he pulled her up behind him with an ease that suggested she weighed nothing at all. She wrapped her arms around his waist to steady herself, feeling the solid muscle beneath the leather, the warmth of another human being. The horse shifted beneath them, powerful and sure, and they rode out of Bitter Springs as the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the desert that stretched endlessly in every direction. For the first mile, Emma said nothing. She kept her face pressed against Blackstone's back, her eyes closed, her mind racing in circles. She did not know this man. She did not know where he was taking her or what he wanted in return for the gold he had spent. But she also knew, with a clarity that startled her, that she was safer now than she had been in years. Safer than she had been since her parents died. As they rode, memories surfaced unbidden, rising like ghosts from shallow graves. Emma had not always lived in Bitter Springs. Once, years ago in a life that felt like someone else's, she had lived in a small farmhouse outside Santa Fe with her parents and her younger brother, Thomas. Her father had been a blacksmith, strong and patient, with hands that could shape iron but were always gentle with his children. Her mother had been a seamstress, quiet and kind, always humming while she worked. They had been poor, scraping by on what little they could earn, but they had been happy. Or at least Emma remembered it that way, though she knew memory could be a liar. Then came the fever, sweeping through the territory like wildfire, indiscriminate and merciless. Her mother died first, coughing up blood in the night while Emma held her hand and prayed to a God who did not seem to be listening. Thomas died 3 days later, his small body burning up from the inside. Her father lasted another year, but grief took him as surely as any illness. He stopped eating, stopped working, stopped living in any way that mattered. When they found him one morning, cold in his bed, Emma had felt almost relieved. At least his suffering was over. Cyrus had come for her after the funeral, her only living relative, her mother's brother. He had promised to care for her, to give her a home, to treat her like family. But Cyrus was a gambler and a drunk, and Emma quickly learned that his promises were worth less than the cards he played with. She worked in his trading post from dawn until long after dark, cooking and cleaning and keeping the books because he could barely write his own name. He drank away whatever profit they made, gambled away the rest. When the outlaws came looking for payment, she had known, somewhere deep down where truth lives, that he would sell her. She had just hoped, foolishly, that she was wrong. Blackstone's voice broke through her thoughts like a stone through glass. "Are you hurt?" She blinked, pulling herself back to the present with effort. "No, just tired." He nodded but said nothing more. They rode in silence for another hour, maybe longer, time stretching and compressing in strange ways. The landscape shifted gradually from scrubland to rolling hills dotted with juniper and pinon pine. The air grew cooler as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple and deep red, like the world was bleeding color. Emma's grip on Blackstone loosened slightly as exhaustion crept in, heavy and insistent. Her head drooped forward, and she caught herself just before she fell asleep against his back, finally. As darkness fell complete and stars began to appear like pinpricks in black cloth, Blackstone guided the horse off the main trail and into a narrow canyon. The walls rose high on either side, blocking out most of the sky. At the far end, hidden among the rocks and shadows, was a small camp. A fire burned low, tended by an older man with gray hair pulled back and a face so weathered it looked like carved wood. He looked up as they approached, his expression unreadable, cautious. "Who is this?" The older man asked in Comanche, his tone wary, almost suspicious. Blackstone dismounted and helped Emma down with steady hands. She swayed slightly, her legs stiff and aching from the long ride. He steadied her with one hand on her elbow, then replied in the same language, words Emma could not understand but whose meaning she could guess from the tone. "A debt paid. She will stay with us for now," the older man, whose name Emma would learn was Red Owl, studied her with sharp eyes that missed nothing. He took in the torn dress, the rope burns on her wrists, the way she held herself like something that had been broken and badly mended. After a long moment, he nodded slowly. "She looks half dead." "Feed her." Blackstone led Emma to the fire and gestured for her to sit. She sank down onto a blanket that smelled of smoke and horses, her whole body aching in ways she had not known were possible. Red Owl handed her a tin cup filled with something warm and brothy, meat and herbs she could not name. She drank it slowly, carefully, the heat spreading through her chest and stomach, easing the knot of fear and exhaustion that had been there since morning. Since Cyrus had tied her wrists and sat her on the porch like merchandise. Blackstone sat across from her, cross-legged, his face illuminated by the flickering firelight. The flames cast shadows that moved across his features, making him look both younger and older at the same time. "You will be safe here," he said, his voice quiet but certain. "No one will take you again." Emma looked at him, really looked at him, searching his face for deception, for some hidden motive, for the catch she knew had to be there. She found none. His eyes were steady, honest in a way that made her chest ache. "Why did you do it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why did you pay for me?" "You don't know me." He was silent for a long moment, his gaze turning distant, looking at something she could not see, something in the past perhaps. "Because I know what it is to be sold," he said finally, each word measured and deliberate. "I know what it is to be worth only what another man decides. And I swore, a long time ago, that I would never let it happen to another person if I had the power to stop it." Emma's chest tightened painfully. She wanted to ask more, to understand what he meant, to know his story, but exhaustion was pulling her under like a strong current she could no longer fight. Red Owl spread another blanket near the fire and motioned for her to lie down. She did, grateful beyond words, her eyes already closing before her head touched the folded cloth that served as a pillow. As she drifted into sleep, deep and dreamless and merciful, she heard Blackstone's voice speaking to Red Owl in Comanche, low and steady. She did not understand the words, but the tone was clear enough. He had made a choice, a decision that could not be unmade. And he would not turn back from it, neither. Emma realized in that moment between waking and sleep. Emma woke to the smell of coffee and wood smoke. Her body stiff and aching from sleeping on hard ground. Morning light filtered through the canyon walls, turning everything golden and soft. For a moment, she forgot where she was, forgot everything that had happened. Then memory rushed back like cold water, and she sat up quickly, her heart racing. The camp was quiet. Red Owl sat by the fire, poking at the embers with a stick, his weathered face thoughtful. Black Stone was nowhere to be seen. Emma rubbed her eyes, trying to shake off the fog of sleep. Her wrists were still raw from the ropes, the skin angry and red. She touched them gingerly, wincing. Red Owl glanced up and gestured toward a tin cup sitting on a flat rock near the fire. "Coffee, it is strong," he said in heavily accented English. His voice was rough, like he did not use it often. Emma nodded her thanks and reached for the cup, wrapping her hands around it for warmth, despite the growing heat of the day. The coffee was indeed strong, bitter enough to make her grimace, but it helped clear her head. "Where is he?" she asked quietly, not sure if Red Owl would answer. "Hunting." "He will return before noon," Red Owl replied. He studied her with those sharp eyes again, and Emma felt exposed, like he could see every secret she had ever kept. "You are not what I expected." Emma did not know what to say to that, so she said nothing. She sipped her coffee and stared into the fire, watching the flames dance and flicker. After a few minutes of silence, Red Owl spoke again. "He does not bring people here. This place is sacred to him, a place he comes when the world is too loud. You should know that." The weight of those words settled over Emma like a blanket. She looked around the camp with new eyes, noticing details she had missed in the darkness. The canyon walls were painted with faded images, ancient handprints, and symbols she did not recognize. Small bundles of sage hung from the branches of a twisted juniper tree. This was not just a camp. It was a sanctuary. Blackstone returned an hour later, as Red Owl had predicted. He carried 2 rabbits, already cleaned and ready for cooking. He nodded to Emma as he passed, his expression unreadable, then set about preparing the meat with practiced efficiency. Emma watched him work, fascinated by the quiet competence of his movements. He did not waste motion, did not second-guess himself. Everything he did seemed deliberate, purposeful. When the rabbits were roasting over the fire, Blackstone finally sat down and looked at her directly. "We need to talk about what happens next," he said. Emma's stomach tightened. Here it was, the moment when he would tell her what he expected in return for saving her. She set down her coffee cup and folded her hands in her lap, bracing herself. "All right, you cannot go back to Bitter Springs. Your uncle will sell you again, or worse. The outlaws may come looking for you if they decide the gold was not enough," Blackstone said, his tone matter of fact. "You need somewhere safe to stay, somewhere people will not ask too many questions." "I have nowhere," Emma said quietly, the admission bitter on her tongue. "No family except Cyrus, no money, no skills that anyone would pay for." Blackstone tilted his head slightly, considering her. "That is not true. Red Owl tells me you can read and write. That is more than most people out here. You kept your uncle's books, did you not?" Emma blinked, surprised. "Yes, but that was just simple accounting. Anyone could do it. You would be surprised," Blackstone said. "There is a ranch about 20 miles north of here. The owner is a man named Samuel Garrett. He is fair, and he does not ask too many questions about a person's past. He needs someone to manage his accounts and correspond with buyers in the East. I can take you there and speak for you." Emma stared at him, trying to understand. "You would do that? After already paying gold for me, you would help me find work?" Blackstone's expression softened slightly, the hard edges of his face relaxing. I did not pay gold for you. I paid gold to free you. There is a difference. What you do with that freedom is your choice, not mine. But I will not leave you with nothing." Tears pricked at Emma's eyes, sudden and unexpected. She blinked them back furiously, not wanting to seem weak or ungrateful. No one had ever spoken to her like that before, like her choices mattered, like she was a person and not just a burden to be managed. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking slightly. They ate the roasted rabbit in silence, the meat tender and flavorful despite the simple preparation. Emma found herself hungrier than she had realized, and she ate until her stomach was full and her hands were greasy. Red Owl watched her with what might have been approval, though it was hard to tell with him. When they finished, Blackstone stood and began packing up the camp with swift efficiency. "We leave in an hour," he said. "The ride to Garrett's ranch will take most of the day. Bring only what you need." Emma looked down at herself and almost laughed. She had nothing. Just the torn dress on her back and the shoes that were falling apart at the seams. Blackstone seemed to realize this at the same moment. He disappeared into a small shelter made of branches and canvas, then returned with a bundle of clothes. "These belong to my sister," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "She was about your size. You can have them." Emma took the bundle with trembling hands. The clothes were simple but well made, a plain brown skirt and a cream-colored blouse, both clean and neatly folded. There was also a shawl, deep red with black embroidery along the edges. "Your sister," Emma said hesitantly. "Where is she now?" Blackstone's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Dead. 5 years now," he said, then turned away before Emma could respond. The conversation was over. She changed behind a large boulder, grateful for the privacy. The clothes fit reasonably well, a little loose in the waist, but nothing she could not manage. The fabric was softer than anything she had worn in years, and she ran her fingers over the embroidery on the shawl, marveling at the skill it must have taken. When she emerged, Red Owl was saddling a second horse, a gray mare with kind eyes. "You ride?" Red Owl asked, a little. "It has been a long time," Emma admitted. Her father had taught her when she was young, but there had been no money for horses after he died. "You will remember," Red Owl said simply, then handed her the reins. The mare nuzzled her hand gently, and Emma felt a small spark of joy. The first she had felt in longer than she could remember. They rode out of the canyon as the sun climbed higher, turning the desert into a furnace. Blackstone led the way on his black stallion, and Emma followed on the gray mare, her body slowly remembering the rhythm of riding. Red Owl stayed behind, offering only a brief nod of farewell. Emma wondered if she would ever see him again, then decided it did not matter. She was moving forward, and that was enough. The landscape changed as they traveled north, the scrubland giving way to grasslands dotted with cattle and the occasional cluster of cottonwood trees marking a creek bed. Blackstone rode in silence, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon. Emma tried to do the same, though she was not sure what she was looking for. Dust clouds? Riders? Danger could come from anywhere out here. They stopped once to water the horses at a small spring, the water cold and clear. Emma drank deeply, splashing some on her face and neck to cool herself. Blackstone refilled their canteens and checked the mare's hooves with the ease of long practice. "She is treating you well?" he asked, gesturing to the horse. "Yes, she is gentle," Emma replied, running a hand down the mare's neck. "What is her name?" "She does not have one. Names are for horses you plan to keep," Blackstone said, swinging back into his saddle. "If Garrett hires you, perhaps he will let you buy her. She is getting old for hard work, but she would serve you well enough." The idea of owning a horse, of having something that belonged to her and no one else, was so foreign that Emma could barely process it. She climbed back onto the mare and followed Blackstone back onto the trail. her mind turning over possibilities she had never allowed herself to consider before. By mid-afternoon, they crested a low rise and Emma saw the Garrett Ranch spread out below them. It was larger than she had expected, with a sprawling main house, several barns, and a network of corrals holding dozens of cattle. Men moved about their work, tiny figures in the distance. Smoke rose from the cookhouse chimney, and Emma could hear the faint sound of hammering from the direction of the blacksmith's forge. Black stone guided them down the slope and toward the main house. A man emerged from the barn as they approached, wiping his hands on a rag. He was in his 50s, Emma guessed, with graying hair and a weathered face that spoke of years spent outdoors. He looked at Blackstone with recognition and something that might have been respect. "Blackstone, did not expect to see you this way," the man said, his voice deep and gravelly. Then his eyes shifted to Emma, curious but not unkind.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you.
"And who is this?" Blackstone dismounted and gestured for Emma to do the same. "Samuel Garrett, this is Emma Winslow. She is looking for work, and I told her you might need someone who can read and write. Someone to manage accounts and correspondence." Garrett looked Emma up and down, not in the way Rake had, but assessing her like he might assess a horse or a piece of equipment. "Can you do figures? Keep records straight?" "Yes, sir. I kept books for my uncle's trading post for 3 years, Emma said, trying to keep her voice steady and confident. "I can read and write clearly, and I know how to balance accounts." Garrett rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "I have been trying to manage it myself, but I am no good at it. Numbers swim around on the page like tadpoles. My wife used to handle it before she passed, and it has been a mess ever since," he admitted. "You would stay in the house, take meals with the hands. Pay is $20 a month plus room and board. Does that suit you?" $20 a month. It was more than Emma had ever earned in her life. She felt dizzy with the sudden reality of it. "Yes, sir. That suits me very well." Garrett nodded, then looked at Blackstone. "You vouch for her?" "I do," Blackstone said without hesitation. "Good enough for me," Garrett said, extending a hand to Emma. She shook it, his grip firm and brief. "You can start tomorrow morning. I will have one of the ranch hands show you to your room and get you settled. We eat supper at 6. Do not be late." Emma nodded, barely able to believe what was happening. Garrett walked back toward the barn, calling out instructions to someone Emma could not see. She turned to Blackstone, words tangling on her tongue. "I do not know how to thank you. You have given me more than I could have ever asked for." Blackstone's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his dark eyes. "You owe me nothing. Just make something of this chance." "That is thanks enough," he said. He started to mount his horse, then paused and looked back at her. "If you ever need help, send word to Red Owl at the canyon. He will find me. Will I see you again?" Emma asked before she could stop herself. Blackstone considered the question, his gaze holding hers. "Perhaps. The world is smaller than it seems," he said. Then he was in the saddle, turning the black stallion toward the trail. Emma watched him ride away, the horse and rider growing smaller against the vast landscape until they disappeared over the rise. A young man appeared at her elbow, startling her. He was perhaps 18, with red hair and a friendly face. "Miss Winslow? I am Tom. Mr. Garrett sent me to show you around," he said with an easy smile. "Come on, I will get you settled before supper." Emma followed him toward the house, casting one last glance at the horizon where Blackstone had vanished. She touched the embroidered shawl around her shoulders, the fabric soft beneath her fingers, and felt something shift inside her. For the first time in years, she felt like she might have a future worth living. 3 months passed at the Garrett Ranch, and Emma found herself settling into a rhythm she had never known before. The work was steady but not crushing, the kind that left her tired at the end of the day but satisfied rather than broken. She kept the books in a small office off the main house, recording cattle sales and supply purchases, writing letters to buyers in Kansas City and Denver, organizing receipts that Samuel Garrett had stuffed into drawers for months. The chaos slowly transformed into order under her careful attention. The ranch hands treated her with cautious respect at first, unsure what to make of a woman doing bookwork. But that changed after she helped one of them write a letter to his mother back in Missouri. Word spread, and soon others came asking for help with their own letters, reading contracts they could not decipher, figuring out how much money they were owed. Emma never refused. She worked by lamplight in the evenings, her fingers stained with ink, helping men find words for feelings they had kept locked inside for years. Tom, the red-haired young man who had first shown her around, became something like a friend. He brought her coffee in the mornings and told her stories about the ranch, about the time a bull got loose and chased Garrett through the barn, about the summer when the creek dried up completely and they had to drive the cattle 15 miles to water. He made her laugh, something she had almost forgotten how to do. But at night, when the ranch grew quiet and the stars spread across the sky like spilled salt, Emma found herself thinking about Blackstone. She wondered where he was, what he was doing, whether he thought about her at all. She told herself it was foolish, that he had simply done a good deed and moved on with his life. But the wondering persisted like a splinter she could not remove. Then one morning in early November, everything changed. Emma was in the office working through a ledger when she heard raised voices outside. She set down her pen and moved to the window, peering through the glass. 3 men on horseback had arrived, and they were not ranch hands. They wore dusty trail clothes and had the hard, watchful look of men accustomed to trouble. Samuel Garrett stood on the porch talking to them, his posture tense. Emma could not hear the words, but she saw Garrett shake his head firmly. The lead rider, a tall man with a black beard, leaned forward in his saddle and said something that made Garrett's jaw tighten. Then the bearded man pointed directly at the house, directly at the window where Emma stood. Her blood went cold. She stepped back quickly, her heart hammering. They were asking about her. She knew it with absolute certainty. But who were they? Men sent by Cyrus? Friends of Rake looking to reclaim what they considered stolen property. She pressed herself against the wall, trying to think, trying to decide what to do. Garrett's voice rose, loud enough for her to hear through the closed window. "I told you, I do not know anyone by that name. You are wasting your time here. Now get off my land before I have my men remove you." The bearded man said something else, too quiet for Emma to catch, then wheeled his horse around. The 3 riders galloped away, kicking up dust that hung in the air long after they disappeared. Emma waited, barely breathing, until Garrett came into the house. He found her in the office, still pressed against the wall, her face pale. "You need to tell me the truth," Garrett said without preamble. His voice was not angry, but it was firm, the voice of a man who would accept no lies. "Who are you really, and why are men looking for you?" Emma's throat went dry. She had known this moment might come, but she had hoped it never would. "My name is Emma Winslow." "That part is true," she began, her voice shaking slightly. 3 months ago, my uncle sold me to outlaws to pay a gambling debt. A man named Blackstone paid them off and brought me here. I thought it was over. I thought I was safe." Garrett's expression softened slightly, though his eyes remained sharp. "The men who were just here said they were looking for stolen property. They said a woman matching your description was taken from Bitter Springs without proper compensation, that the transaction was interrupted unlawfully." "That is a lie," Emma said, her voice gaining strength. "Blackstone paid them more than I was worth. He paid them in gold. They took it and rode away." "There was no theft." Garrett studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I believe you. But belief does not change the fact that men are looking for you, and they will not stop just because I sent them away once. They will come back, probably with more men, and they will not ask politely next time. Fear clawed at Emma's chest, but beneath it was something else. Something harder. Anger. She had finally found a place where she could breathe, where she could build something resembling a life, and now it was being threatened. What should I do? You need to get word to Blackstone. If anyone can sort this mess out, it is him, Garrett said. Tom can ride to the canyon and find Red Owl. It will take a day. Maybe 2, but it is the best option we have. Emma nodded, though the thought of involving Blackstone again, of pulling him back into her problems, made her stomach twist with guilt. But Garrett was right. She had no other options, no one else who could help. Thank you for believing me, she whispered. I have been ranching for 30 years. I know the difference between honest people and liars, Garrett said gruffly. Now go about your work like nothing happened. If those men are watching, I do not want them to think we are worried. Tom left within the hour, riding hard toward the canyon. Emma tried to focus on her ledgers, but the numbers swam before her eyes, meaningless and frustrating. She kept glancing out the window, half expecting to see riders approaching. The day dragged by with agonizing slowness, each hour feeling like 10 that evening at supper. The ranch hands were quieter than usual. Word had spread about the visitors, and everyone seemed on edge, watching the darkness beyond the firelight. Emma picked at her food, her appetite gone. Garrett sat at the head of the table, his rifle propped against the wall within easy reach. No one mentioned it, but everyone noticed. The next day passed in similar tension. Emma threw herself into her work, organizing files that were already organized, rewriting letters that did not need rewriting, anything to keep her hands busy and her mind occupied. She was in the office when she heard hoofbeats approaching fast. Her heart leapt into her throat, but when she looked out the window, she saw Tom returning, and behind him, riding the black stallion, was Blackstone. Relief flooded through her so powerfully that her knees went weak. She gripped the edge of the desk to steady herself, then hurried outside. Blackstone dismounted with his usual fluid grace, his dark eyes scanning the ranch, taking in everything. When his gaze found Emma, something flickered across his face. Too quick for her to read. Tell me what happened, he said without preamble. Emma recounted the visit from the 3 men. Their accusations, Garrett's refusal to hand her over. Blackstone listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. When she finished, he turned to Garrett. Did you recognize any of them? The one with the black beard. I have seen him before, in Tucson. Name is Dalton, I think. He runs with a gang that operates between here and the border, Garrett replied. Not decent men. Blackstone's jaw tightened. Rake sent them. He must have decided the gold was not enough after all. Or perhaps he simply does not like being made to look foolish in front of his men, he said, his voice cold. They will come back, and they will bring more men. Garrett cannot protect you against a full gang, not without bloodshed. So what do I do? Emma asked, hating the tremor in her voice. Run again? Keep running until they finally catch me. Blackstone looked at her, really looked at her, and she saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. No, running is done. We end this now, he said. But I need you to trust me, and I need you to do exactly as I say. I trust you, Emma said without hesitation, and she meant it. Blackstone outlined his plan quickly and efficiently. They would use Emma as bait, let word spread that she was still at the ranch, unprotected now that Blackstone had left. Dalton and his men would come, confident in their numbers and their guns. But they would be walking into a trap. Blackstone would be waiting with men he trusted, Comanche warriors who owed him debts of honor, men who could move through the darkness like ghosts. It was risky, dangerous, but it was the only way to end the threat permanently. Garrett did not like it. "You are asking me to put my ranch in the middle of a war," he said bluntly. "I am asking you to help me protect someone who has earned protection," Blackstone replied. "But if you say no, I will take Emma and disappear. You will never see us again, and Dalton will have no reason to bother you." Garrett was quiet for a long moment, his gaze moving between Blackstone and Emma. Finally, he sighed heavily. "All right. But if my cattle get scattered or my barn burns down, you are paying for it." A ghost of a smile touched Blackstone's lips. Agreed. Over the next 2 days, preparations were made with quiet efficiency. Blackstone rode out and returned with 5 Comanche warriors, silent men with hard faces who set up camp in the hills behind the ranch where they could not be seen. Emma watched them from a distance, fascinated and a little frightened by the way they moved. The way they seemed to blend into the landscape itself. Tom and the other ranch hands were told to stay in the bunkhouse after dark, to keep away from the main house. Garrett made a show of riding into town and complaining loudly at the saloon about the trouble Emma had brought to his ranch, about how he was considering sending her away. It was exactly the kind of talk that would get back to Dalton within hours. On the 3rd night, they came. Emma was in the main house with the lamps burning, visible through the windows, exactly as Blackstone had instructed. She sat at the table pretending to work on ledgers, though her hands shook so badly she could barely hold the pen. Blackstone was upstairs in the dark, watching through a window. Garrett was in the barn with his rifle. The Comanche warriors were positioned around the property, invisible in the shadows. Emma heard the horses before she saw them. At least 8 riders, maybe more, approaching from the south. Her heart hammered against her ribs so hard she thought it might crack them. She forced herself to keep her head down, to keep writing, to not look up until she heard the pounding on the door. "Open up, girl. We know you are in there," Dalton's voice called out, rough and confident. "Come out peaceful, and nobody gets hurt. You are coming with us one way or another." Emma stood on trembling legs and moved toward the door. Her hand touched the handle, then paused. She remembered Blackstone's words. "Wait until you hear the signal. Do not open the door until you hear it." She pressed her forehead against the wood, breathing hard, counting seconds that felt like hours. Then came the sound. A coyote's howl, high and wavering, echoing across the ranch. But Emma knew it was not a coyote. It was the signal. Everything happened at once. The Comanche warriors emerged from the darkness like shadows given form, their war cries splitting the night. Dalton's men shouted in confusion and fear, their horses rearing and panicking. Gunfire erupted, flashes of light in the darkness, the crack of rifles and the deeper boom of shotguns. Emma threw herself to the floor, covering her head with her hands, her ears ringing from the noise. It lasted less than 5 minutes, though it felt like an eternity. When the shooting stopped and the echoes faded, Emma stayed on the floor, too terrified to move. Then she heard footsteps on the porch, heavy boots, and the door opened. She looked up, expecting Dalton or one of his men. But it was Blackstone. His face was streaked with dirt and powder smoke, and there was blood on his sleeve. But his eyes were steady. "It is over," he said simply. Extending a hand to help her up, Emma took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. Her legs felt like water. "Are they dead?" "3 are. The others fled, including Dalton." "They will not come back," Blackstone said. His voice was calm, matter-of-fact, but Emma saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw was clenched tight. "They know now that you are protected, that there is a cost to pursuing you. Word will spread. The threat is ended." Emma wanted to feel relief, but all she felt was exhaustion and a strange, hollow numbness. She had watched men die tonight, even if she had not seen it directly. She had been the cause of violence, of death. The weight of it pressed down on her like a physical thing. Blackstone seemed to understand. He guided her to a chair and knelt in front of her, his dark eyes searching her face. You did nothing wrong. Do you understand me? You defended yourself. That is not a sin. I brought this to Garrett's ranch. I brought danger to people who showed me kindness, Emma whispered, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. No, Dalton brought this. Rake brought this. Men who think they can own other people brought this, Blackstone said firmly. He reached up and wiped the tears from her face with surprising gentleness. You are not responsible for the evil in other men's hearts. Emma looked at him, at this man who had saved her twice now, who had risked his life and called in debts to protect her. And she felt something crack open inside her chest. Why do you keep helping me? What am I to you? Blackstone was silent for a long moment, his hand still resting against her cheek. When he spoke, his voice was so quiet she almost missed it. You are the first person in a very long time who looked at me and saw a man instead of a savage or a curiosity. You did not flinch when I touched you. You did not treat me like something dangerous that needed to be managed, he said. That is rare. That is worth protecting. Emma's breath caught in her throat. She reached up and covered his hand with hers, holding it against her face. You are worth far more than you believe, she whispered. Something passed between them in that moment, something unspoken but profound. Blackstone leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching hers, and Emma thought he might kiss her. But instead, he pulled back, releasing her face with what looked like reluctance. You should rest. Tomorrow we will make sure the ranch is secure, and then I will leave you in peace. What if I do not want peace? Emma asked, the words escaping before she could stop them. What if I want you to stay? Blackstone's expression was unreadable, but his eyes held hers for a long searching moment. Ask me that question when the sun rises and the dead are buried. If you still mean it then, we will talk, he said. Then he stood and walked out into the night, leaving Emma alone with her racing heart and the echo of words she could not take back. Dawn came cold and gray, the sun hidden behind clouds that promised rain. Emma had not slept. She sat on the porch wrapped in the embroidered shawl, watching the ranch come alive as men moved about their morning tasks with unusual quietness. The bodies of the dead outlaws had been removed during the night, taken somewhere Emma did not ask about and did not want to know. Blood had been scrubbed from the dirt, bullet casings collected, evidence erased as if the violence had never happened. Blackstone emerged from the barn where he had spent the night with his Comanche warriors. He moved across the yard toward her with that same fluid grace, and Emma felt her heart kick against her ribs. In the pale morning light, she could see the exhaustion on his face, the way he carried that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. He climbed the porch steps and stood before her, waiting. I still mean it, Emma said before he could speak. What I said last night. I still mean it. Blackstone exhaled slowly, as if he had been holding his breath. He sat down beside her on the wooden bench, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. You should know what you are asking for. My life is not simple. I have enemies among my own people who believe I betrayed them by leaving, and enemies among white men who will never see me as anything but a threat. If you stay with me, that becomes your burden too. I know what it is to be seen as nothing, Emma replied quietly. To be treated like property, like something disposable. You gave me back my life when you cut those ropes in Bitter Springs. Everything since then has been a gift I never expected. If the cost of keeping that gift is standing beside you and facing whatever comes, then I will pay it gladly. Blackstone turned to look at her fully, and Emma saw something vulnerable in his eyes, something raw and unguarded. I had a wife once. Her name was Morning Dove. She died giving birth to our son, and the child died 3 days later, he said, each word carefully measured, as if speaking them cost him something precious. I buried them both in the canyon where Red Owl camps now. That is why it is sacred to me. For 5 years, I told myself I would never allow myself to care for anyone again, that the pain of loss was too great to risk. Emma's chest tightened with sympathy and understanding. She reached out and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. I cannot promise you that I will not die, that I will not leave you through accident or illness or any of the 1,000 ways people are taken from this world. But I can promise that whatever time I have, I want to spend it with you. Not because you saved me, but because when I look at you, I see someone who understands what it means to be broken and still choose to keep living. Blackstone's hand tightened around hers. He lifted their joined hands and pressed them against his chest, over his heart. Then we will face the world together. But there is something you must do first, something that will protect you from men like Dalton and Rake forever. Emma frowned slightly, confused. What do you mean? We must marry. Not in secret, but publicly, with witnesses and records that cannot be disputed. As my wife, you become protected under treaties between the Comanche and the United States government. Any harm done to you would be treated as an act of aggression against my people. It is not perfect protection, but it is more than you have now, Blackstone explained. There is a mission 30 miles west of here, run by a priest named Father Miguel. He performs marriages and keeps records. He is a good man who does not judge marriage. The word hung in the air between them, enormous and terrifying and exhilarating all at once. Emma had never imagined herself married, had never dared to hope for such a thing after Cyrus sold her. You would marry me, truly? I would not have suggested it otherwise, Blackstone said, a hint of dry humor touching his voice. But you must be certain. This is not something you can undo easily if you change your mind. Emma thought of the empty years stretching behind her, all the days she had survived but not lived, all the nights she had lain awake wondering if there was any point to continuing. Then she thought of the past 3 months, the small joys she had discovered at the Garrett Ranch, the feeling of safety and purpose. And beneath all of that, threading through everything like a golden cord, was Blackstone, the way he looked at her as if she mattered. The way he had protected her without demanding anything in return. The way his presence made her feel less alone in a world that had always been hostile. I am certain, she said firmly. When do we leave? They departed within the hour. Blackstone spoke briefly with Samuel Garrett, who listened with his usual gruff practicality, then nodded his approval. You will always have work here if you need it, Garrett told Emma, shaking her hand one last time. You are a good woman, and you deserve happiness. If this man can give it to you, then I am glad. Tom emerged from the bunkhouse to see them off, his young face troubled. You are really leaving? He asked Emma, his voice cracking slightly. Not forever. Just for a while, Emma replied, touched by his concern. I will write to you, I promise. And you must keep practicing your letters. Tom nodded, blinking hard against tears he was too proud to shed. I will. You take care of yourself, Miss Emma. The ride to the mission took most of the day. Blackstone's Comanche warriors had departed at dawn, melting back into the landscape as silently as they had appeared. It was just Emma and Blackstone now, riding side by side through country that grew increasingly rugged and beautiful. Mesas rose in the distance like ancient monuments, their red stone glowing in the afternoon sun. Eagles circled overhead, their cries sharp and wild. They stopped once to rest the horses and eat the provisions Garrett had packed for them. Emma sat on a flat rock and watched Blackstone tend to the animals with practiced efficiency. Tell me about your sister, she said suddenly. The one whose clothes I wear. Blackstone stilled for a moment, then continued brushing down his stallion. Her name was Little Bird. She was younger than me by 6 years, quick to laugh and impossible to keep still. She wanted to learn everything, to see everything, he said, his voice soft with memory. When I decided to leave our band and try to make a life in the white man's world, she begged to come with me. I refused. I told her it was too dangerous, that she would be safer with our people. He paused, his hand resting on the horse's neck. A year after I left, there was a raid by Texas Rangers. Little Bird was killed along with 17 others, mostly women and children. They said it was retaliation for stolen cattle, but there was never any proof our people had taken anything. I was not there to protect her. I had abandoned her to chase some foolish dream of peace between two worlds that will never accept each other. Emma rose and walked to him, placing her hand on his arm. It was not your fault. You could not have known what would happen. That does not make her any less dead, Blackstone said bitterly. For a long time, I carried her clothes with me because they were all I had left of her. When I gave them to you, it felt like betrayal at first, like I was erasing her. But then I realized she would have liked you. She would have approved of what I did in Bitter Springs. Little Bird always had a fierce sense of justice. Then I will honor her memory by wearing them well, Emma said quietly. And by living the kind of life she would have wanted to live if she had been given the chance. Blackstone looked at her, and something in his expression shifted, softened. He reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. You are stronger than you know, Emma Winslow. I had to be. The world does not leave much choice, Emma replied, leaning into his touch. They reached the mission just as the sun was setting, painting the adobe walls in shades of orange and gold.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us now. Back to the story.
It was a small compound built around a central courtyard, with a chapel, living quarters for the priests, and a garden that somehow flourished despite the harsh climate. Father Miguel was in the garden when they arrived, an older man with white hair and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. He straightened from his weeding and greeted Blackstone in Spanish, then in English when he noticed Emma. Blackstone, my friend. It has been too long, Father Miguel said warmly, clasping Blackstone's hand. And who is this lovely young woman? This is Emma. We have come to ask you to marry us, Blackstone said without preamble. Father Miguel's eyebrows rose in surprise, but his smile did not waver. Marry you? Well, this is unexpected but wonderful news. Come inside, both of you. We must talk and make certain you understand what you are undertaking. They spent the next hour in Father Miguel's small office, answering his questions about their intentions, their understanding of marriage, their commitment to each other. The priest was thorough but gentle, probing without being intrusive. When he seemed satisfied, he leaned back in his chair and regarded them both with a thoughtful expression. I have known Blackstone for many years. He helped defend this mission when bandits tried to raid our supplies. He's a man of honor, though the world does not always recognize it, Father Miguel said. Emma, you should know that marrying him will not be easy. There are people who will disapprove, who will make your life difficult because you have chosen to love across the divide that separates your peoples. I know, Emma said simply. But I would rather face that difficulty with him than face safety and loneliness without him. Father Miguel smiled broadly. Then I will marry you tomorrow morning. After Mass. Tonight you will stay here as guests of the mission, in separate rooms of course. And in the morning we will make you husband and wife before God and witnesses. That night, Emma lay in a narrow bed in a small room that smelled of lavender and old wood. She stared at the ceiling, her mind racing too fast for sleep. Tomorrow she would marry Blackstone. Tomorrow she would bind her life to his in a way that could not easily be undone. The enormity of it should have terrified her, but instead, she felt a strange, bubbling excitement, like champagne fizzing in her veins. A soft knock came at her door. She rose and opened it to find Blackstone standing in the hallway, his face partially shadowed. I could not sleep, he admitted. I wanted to make certain you had not changed your mind. Emma smiled and stepped aside to let him in. He entered, and she closed the door quietly behind him. They stood facing each other in this small room, the air between them charged with something electric and fragile. I have not changed my mind. Have you? No, Blackstone said. He reached out and took both her hands in his, holding them carefully as if they were something precious and easily broken. I want you to know that I will spend every day trying to be worthy of your trust. I will protect you, provide for you, and honor you in all things. This I swear. Emma's eyes filled with tears, but they were good tears, cleansing tears. And I swear to stand beside you, to be your partner and your friend, to face whatever comes with courage instead of fear. You have already given me so much. Let me give you something in return. Blackstone pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, and Emma rested her head against his chest. She could hear his heartbeat, strong and steady, and she matched her breathing to its rhythm. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the quiet darkness. Two people who had found each other against all odds and all reason. When Blackstone finally left to return to his own room, Emma climbed back into bed and fell asleep almost immediately. Her dreams peaceful for the first time in years. Morning came bright and clear. The sky a brilliant blue that seemed to stretch forever. Emma dressed carefully in the best of little bird's clothes, the cream blouse and brown skirt, with the embroidered shawl draped over her shoulders. She brushed her hair until it shone, then braided it simply. When she looked at herself in the small mirror on the wall, she barely recognized the woman staring back. This woman looked hopeful. This woman looked alive. The wedding was held in the mission chapel after Father Miguel finished morning mass. A handful of people attended, locals who lived near the mission and had heard there was to be a wedding. They filled the first few pews, curious and friendly. Emma walked down the short aisle alone, with no one to give her away, but she did not feel alone. Blackstone waited for her at the altar, dressed in clean clothes with his hair tied back. And the look on his face when he saw her made her breath catch. Father Miguel performed the ceremony in both English and Spanish, his voice clear and resonant in the small space. Emma and Blackstone spoke their vows, simple words that carried the weight of profound promises. When Father Miguel pronounced them husband and wife, Blackstone cupped Emma's face in his hands and kissed her gently, reverently, as if sealing something sacred. The witnesses clapped and called out congratulations. Father Miguel produced a ledger and had them both sign their names, making the marriage official and legally binding. Emma wrote her name carefully, then added beside it, "Wife of Blackstone," and felt a fierce pride as she did so. They stayed at the mission for one more night, celebrating with a simple feast that Father Miguel insisted on providing. There was roasted chicken and vegetables from the garden, fresh bread and wine, and music from an old guitar that one of the local men played with surprising skill. Emma danced with Blackstone in the courtyard under the stars, his hand warm and solid at her waist, and felt happiness so intense it was almost painful. Later, in the small room that was now theirs to share, Blackstone held her close and whispered promises against her skin. Emma gave herself to him freely, without fear or shame, and discovered that tenderness could exist even in a world as harsh as theirs. They loved each other slowly, carefully, learning the landscape of each other's bodies with patience and wonder. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, Emma traced the scars on Blackstone's chest with her fingertips. "Tell me their stories," she whispered, and he did. Each scar had a history, a moment of pain survived, a battle won or lost. He spoke in his low, steady voice, and Emma listened, memorizing every word, every detail. She wanted to know all of him, every piece of his past that had shaped him into the man he had become when he finished. She pressed her lips to each scar in turn, a benediction, a promise that she would carry these stories with him now, that he would no longer bear them alone. Blackstone pulled her close again, burying his face in her hair. "I never thought I would feel this again. Peace, belonging," he murmured. "Neither did I," Emma whispered back. "But we have it now. And I will fight to keep it. As will I," Blackstone promised. As will I. They left the mission 2 days after the wedding, riding north toward territory Emma had never seen. Blackstone had spoken of a place he owned, land he had purchased years ago with money earned from tracking and guiding wagon trains through dangerous country. It was remote, he warned her, far from any town, but it was theirs and no one could take it from them. Emma had smiled and said that remote sounded perfect. The journey took nearly a week through country that grew increasingly wild and beautiful. They crossed rivers swollen with late autumn rain, climbed through mountain passes where the air turned thin and cold, and descended into valleys carpeted with golden grass that rippled like water in the wind. Blackstone showed her how to read the land, how to spot the signs of game trails and water sources, how to tell if other travelers had passed recently. Emma absorbed it all with eager attention, feeling herself transformed from a woman who had lived her whole life in fear into someone who could survive in this vast wilderness. They encountered other travelers only twice. The first time was a family in a covered wagon, heading west with hope written on their tired faces. They stared at Emma and Blackstone with open suspicion, and the father rested his hand on his rifle until they had passed. Emma felt the familiar sting of judgment, but Blackstone simply squeezed her hand and kept riding. The second encounter was with a group of Comanche hunters who recognized Blackstone immediately. They spoke in rapid conversation that Emma could not follow, gesturing and laughing, and one of them gave Blackstone a knowing look that made him smile slightly. When they parted ways, Emma asked what they had said. They congratulated me on finding a wife, and said I looked happier than they had seen me in many years, Blackstone replied. They also said you must be very brave or very foolish to marry me, and I told them you were both, Emma laughed, the sound bright and unexpected in the quiet landscape. They are probably right. On the 7th day, they crested a ridge and Blackstone pulled his horse to a stop. There, he said simply, pointing down into the valley below. Emma looked and felt her breath catch. The valley was wide and green, protected on 3 sides by gentle hills covered in pine and juniper. A creek ran through the center, its water clear and fast over smooth stones. Near the creek stood a cabin, small but solid, built from logs with a stone chimney rising from one end. Beyond the cabin was a corral and a small barn, and further out, she could see horses grazing peacefully in the tall grass. It looked like something from a dream, a place untouched by the ugliness Emma had known for most of her life. You built this? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper, with help from Red Owl and a few others. It took 2 summers, Blackstone said. I always thought I would live here alone, that it would be my refuge when the world became too much. But now I can see it differently. Now I can see it as a home. They rode down into the valley as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. The horses sensed they were near rest and quickened their pace without urging. When they reached the cabin, Blackstone dismounted and lifted Emma down, his hands lingering at her waist. Welcome home, wife, he said, and Emma heard the weight of meaning in those simple words. The cabin was simple inside, just 2 rooms, but it was clean and well built. There was a stone fireplace, a sturdy table with 2 chairs, shelves built into the walls, and a bed frame waiting for a mattress. Windows on 2 sides let in light and air. Emma walked through slowly, touching the walls, the table, imagining the life they would build here. Blackstone watched her with an expression she was learning to read, hope mixed with uncertainty, as if he feared she might find it lacking. It is perfect, Emma said, turning to face him. Truly perfect. The relief on his face was immediate and profound. He crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. I will make it better. I will build you a proper kitchen, add another room for when we need space. Whatever you want, I will provide it. I want you, Emma said simply. Everything else is just details. They spent the remaining daylight unloading supplies and settling the horses. Blackstone showed Emma the barn, the root cellar he had dug into the hillside for storing food through winter. The chicken coop that currently stood empty, but would soon house hens he planned to trade for. Emma marveled at how much thought he had put into this place. How every detail showed careful planning and hope for a future he had not been certain would ever arrive. That night they made love in front of the fireplace on blankets spread across the wooden floor, the cabin still lacking a proper bed. The fire cast dancing shadows on the walls, and Emma watched them as Blackstone moved above her, his face intense with concentration and tenderness. Afterward, they lay tangled together, the fire warming their bare skin, and Emma felt a contentment so complete it was almost frightening. She had never known life could feel like this. "What are you thinking?" Blackstone asked, running his fingers through her hair. "That I am afraid to be this happy. That it feels too good to last," Emma admitted. Blackstone propped himself up on one elbow and looked down at her, his dark eyes serious. "Happiness does not have to be earned through suffering. You are allowed to feel joy without waiting for it to be taken away. We will have hard days, I do not doubt that, but we will face them together. And the good days we will celebrate together too." Emma reached up and traced the line of his jaw with her fingertips. "How did you become so wise?" "Through making every mistake possible and learning from each one," Blackstone replied with a slight smile. "I spent years being angry at the world, at my people for not accepting my choices, at white men for never seeing me as fully human. That anger ate at me like poison. It was not until I let it go that I could begin to actually live instead of just survive." Emma nodded slowly, understanding more than he perhaps realized. "I was angry too. At my parents for dying and leaving me with Cyrus, at Cyrus for selling me, at the whole town of Bitter Springs for watching and doing nothing. But I think that anger is finally loosening its grip. Here, in this place, with you, I can feel it starting to drain away." "Good," Blackstone said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Let it go. We have better things to fill our hearts with now." The first weeks in the valley passed in a blur of activity. Blackstone hunted and brought back deer and rabbit, which Emma learned to butcher and preserve. She had never done such work before, and her first attempts were clumsy and wasteful. But Blackstone taught her with endless patience, showing her where to make cuts, how to strip the hide, how to render fat for cooking. Emma discovered she had a knack for it once she overcame her initial squeamishness, and soon she was working alongside him with growing confidence. They traded with a traveling merchant for chickens and a milk cow. And suddenly, the homestead felt more alive, filled with the sounds of animals and purpose. Emma tended the chickens with surprising affection, naming each one, despite Blackstone's amused warnings that she should not grow attached to creatures they might eventually eat. She planted a small garden near the cabin, working seeds into the cold earth and praying they would take root before winter truly arrived. Red Owl visited once, appearing one morning as if materializing from the landscape itself. He stayed for 3 days, helping Blackstone repair the corral fence and smoking a pipe with him in the evenings while Emma cooked. On the third night, as they all sat around the fire, Red Owl spoke to Emma in his halting English. "You are good for him. He smiles now. Before, when he came to Canyon, he was like stone, hard and cold. Now he is like river, still strong but moving alive," Red Owl said, his weathered face softening. Little Bird would have approved. She always wanted him to find peace. Emma felt tears prick her eyes at the mention of Blackstone's sister. "I hope I can honor her memory by making him happy," Red Owl nodded solemnly. "You already do. I see it in his eyes when he looks at you." That is enough. When Red Owl departed, Emma felt the isolation of their location more keenly, but it was not an unpleasant feeling. She and Blackstone had each other, and that was proving to be more than sufficient. They fell into comfortable rhythms, dividing tasks based on skill and preference, learning each other's habits and quirks. Emma discovered that Blackstone sang quietly while he worked with the horses, Old Comanche songs in a language she did not understand but found beautiful nonetheless. Blackstone learned that Emma talked to herself when she was concentrating, carrying on entire conversations with no one as she worked through problems or planned her day. Winter arrived suddenly, an early snowstorm that dumped 2 feet of white across the valley in a single night. Emma woke to find the world transformed, silent and pristine. Blackstone built up the fire and made coffee while she stood at the window, mesmerized by the beauty of it. They spent that day inside, cocooned in warmth while the storm raged outside, and Emma felt a happiness so pure it brought tears to her eyes. As winter deepened, they received an unexpected visitor. Samuel Garrett arrived on horseback, bundled against the cold, leading a pack mule loaded with supplies. Emma rushed out to greet him, shocked and delighted to see his familiar face. Garrett dismounted with a grunt, his joints stiff from the long cold ride. "Figured you two might be running low on some things," Garrett said gruffly, gesturing to the mule. "Brought coffee, sugar, flour, some other staples. Also brought you a wedding present, though it is about 3 months late." He untied a bundle from the mule and handed it to Emma. She unwrapped it to find a beautiful quilt, clearly handmade in shades of blue and cream. "The ranch hands' wives made it when they heard you had gotten married. They wanted you to have something nice," Garrett explained, looking slightly embarrassed. Emma clutched the quilt to her chest, overcome with emotion. "This is too generous. Please tell them thank you. Tell them it means more than they could know." Garrett stayed for 2 days, sleeping in the barn and taking meals with them. He and Blackstone talked about horses and land management and the changing territory. Emma listened and contributed where she could, feeling the strange pleasure of ordinary domestic life. On the morning Garrett prepared to leave, he pulled Emma aside. "You look happy. Happier than I ever saw you at the ranch," he said quietly. "That is good to see. You deserved better than what life gave you, and it looks like you finally got it." "I did," Emma agreed. "Thank you for everything you did for me, for giving me a chance when I had nothing." Garrett waved off her gratitude with characteristic gruffness, but his eyes were warm. "You earned your keep and then some. If you ever need anything, you know where to find me. And tell Blackstone that offer of work stands for him too. I could use a man with his skills." After Garrett left, Emma felt a renewed sense of connection to the world beyond their valley. They were not completely isolated, not entirely alone. There were people who cared about them, who wished them well. It was a comforting thought as the winter stretched on. Spring arrived slowly, the snow melting in patches to reveal brown grass that gradually turned green again. Emma's garden began to sprout, tiny green shoots pushing up through the dark earth. She checked them every morning with an excitement that made Blackstone smile. The chickens began laying more regularly, and the cow produced enough milk for them to make butter and cheese. Life felt abundant in ways Emma had never experienced. One morning in late spring, Emma woke feeling strange, her stomach unsettled. She rushed outside and was sick behind the cabin, her body heaving until there was nothing left. Blackstone found her there, pale and shaking, and immediately grew concerned. "You are ill. I should ride for a doctor." "No," Emma said, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. A suspicion had begun forming in her mind, one that filled her with equal parts terror and joy. "I do not think I am ill. I think I might be with child." Blackstone went very still, his eyes widening. "Are you certain?" "Not completely. But I am late, and this sickness, it feels different from regular illness," Emma said. She looked up at him, trying to read his reaction. "How do you feel about that possibility?" Blackstone knelt beside her, taking her hands in his. "Terrified," he admitted. "I lost a wife and child before. The thought of going through that again makes me want to run as far as I can. But also," his voice softened, "also hopeful. The thought of a child, our child, of seeing you grow round with life, of holding a baby that is part of both of us. That fills me with wonder." Emma squeezed his hands. "I am terrified too. But I want this. I want to give you a family again, to build something that lasts beyond just the two of us." Over the following weeks, Emma's suspicions were confirmed. Her body began to change in subtle ways, her breasts growing tender, her waist thickening slightly. Blackstone became almost comically protective, insisting she avoid heavy lifting and rest more than she wanted. Emma bore it with good humor, touched by his concern even when it bordered on excessive. As summer arrived in full force, Emma's belly began to show unmistakably. She sewed new dresses to accommodate her changing shape, and Blackstone began work on an addition to the cabin, a small room that would serve as a nursery. He worked from dawn until dusk, driven by a need to prepare, to make everything perfect for the child who would arrive when autumn came. One afternoon, as Emma sat in the shade shelling peas, a rider appeared on the ridge overlooking their valley. Emma's heart clenched with automatic fear, memories of Dalton and his men still fresh despite the months that had passed. But as the rider descended, she recognized the horse and relaxed. It was Tom, the young man from Garrett's ranch. Tom dismounted near the cabin, his face flushed from hard riding. "Miss Emma, Mr. Blackstone," he greeted them, slightly out of breath. "Mr. Garrett sent me with news. Thought you should know that Rake and Dalton both got arrested up in Colorado. They tried to rob a bank and killed a deputy in the process. They are going to hang within the month." Emma felt something heavy lift from her chest, a weight she had not fully realized she was still carrying. "They are really gone? We are truly safe." "Truly safe," Tom confirmed with a wide grin. "Mr. Garrett wanted you to know so you would not have to worry anymore. He also sent these." Tom pulled out a bundle of letters tied with string. "Mail that came for you at the ranch." Emma took the letters with shaking hands. Most were from people she had helped write letters for, thanking her and updating her on their lives. But one was different, addressed in an unfamiliar feminine hand. She opened it carefully and began to read, her eyes widening with each line. It was from a women's organization in Denver, one dedicated to helping women escape abusive situations and find honest work. Someone, Emma suspected Father Miguel, though the letter did not say, had written to them about Emma's story. They were inviting her to share her experiences, to help them understand how to better serve women in similar circumstances. They offered to pay for her travel and accommodation if she was willing to speak. Emma looked up at Blackstone, who had been reading over her shoulder. "What do you think?" "I think you should go," Blackstone said without hesitation. "Your story could help others. That is worth the journey, but the baby, the ranch. I cannot leave you with all the work," Emma protested. Blackstone smiled and placed his hand on her belly, feeling the subtle movements of the child within. "Red Owl will come stay while you are gone. The baby will not arrive for months yet. And this is important, Emma. You have a chance to turn your pain into something that helps others. That is a rare gift." So in late summer, when Emma was 6 months pregnant, but still able to travel, she made the journey to Denver with Tom as her escort. The women's organization welcomed her with open arms, and for 3 days she shared her story with a room full of women who listened with fierce attention. She spoke of Cyrus's betrayal, of being tied and offered as payment, of Blackstone's intervention and the life they had built together. She spoke of the importance of seeing women as human beings with agency and worth, not as property to be bought and sold. When she finished, the women rose in applause, many of them crying. Several came forward to share their own stories, their own escapes and survivals. Emma realized that her pain was not unique, that countless women had endured similar horrors. But she also realized that her healing, her happiness, could serve as a beacon of hope for those still trapped in darkness. She returned to the valley 2 weeks later, exhausted but fulfilled. Blackstone met her at the ridge, unable to wait for her to reach the cabin. He pulled her from her horse and held her close, his relief palpable. "I missed you every moment you were gone," he murmured against her hair. "And I missed you," Emma replied. "But I am glad I went. I feel like I have reclaimed something I did not know I had lost. My voice. My power to shape my own story." Autumn painted the valley in shades of gold and crimson, and Emma's time drew near. Blackstone had located a midwife, a Comanche woman named Soft Rain who lived 2 valleys over. She came to stay with them in the final weeks, preparing herbs and teas, checking Emma's progress with experienced hands. Emma was frightened, remembering what Blackstone had told her about losing Mourning Dove, but Soft Rain radiated calm competence that soothed her fears. The labor began on a clear October morning. Emma's water broke as she was feeding the chickens, and she called for Blackstone with a voice that was steady despite her racing heart. He was there instantly, his face pale but determined. Soft Rain took charge immediately, guiding Emma into the cabin and onto the bed they had prepared. The hours that followed were the longest and most difficult of Emma's life. Pain rolled through her in waves, each one stronger than the last. Blackstone stayed by her side, holding her hand, whispering encouragement, wiping sweat from her face. Soft Rain moved around them with quiet efficiency, monitoring progress, adjusting Emma's position, offering sips of herbal tea. Finally, as the sun began to set and golden light streamed through the windows, Emma felt an overwhelming urge to push. Soft Rain nodded her approval, and Emma bore down with every ounce of strength she possessed. Blackstone's hand tightened around hers, and she could see tears streaming down his face. With a final tremendous effort, Emma felt the baby slip free. The sound of its first cry filled the cabin, strong and healthy and perfect. Soft Rain wrapped the infant in clean cloth and placed it in Emma's arms. "A daughter," she announced with a smile. Strong like her mother, Emma looked down at the tiny face, red and wrinkled and absolutely beautiful, and felt her heart expand to a size she had not known was possible. Blackstone leaned close, his tears falling freely now, and touched the baby's cheek with one gentle finger. "She is perfect," he whispered. "You are perfect. Thank you for this gift." They named her Dawn, for the new beginning she represented. Emma recovered slowly over the following weeks, her body healing as she learned the rhythms of motherhood. Blackstone was a devoted father, waking in the night to bring Dawn to Emma for feeding, changing soiled cloths without complaint, singing Comanche lullabies that made the baby coo with contentment. Winter came again, but this time the cabin felt warmer, fuller. Dawn grew rapidly, her dark eyes watching everything with intense curiosity. Emma and Blackstone marveled at every small milestone, the first smile, the first time she grabbed Blackstone's finger and held tight, the way she turned her head toward the sound of their voices one snowy evening, as they sat by the fire with Dawn sleeping peacefully between them. Emma looked at Blackstone and saw her entire world. "Do you remember what you said to me that first night, when you cut the ropes in Bitter Springs?" "I told you not to look back," Blackstone replied, his arm coming around her shoulders. "I never did," Emma said softly. "I kept my eyes forward, toward you, toward this life we have built. And I would not change a single moment, not even the painful ones, because they led me here." Blackstone kissed her forehead, then Dawn's, his heart full beyond measure. "We built something worth keeping, something that will last." Outside, snow fell softly over the valley, covering everything in pristine white. The horses were warm in the barn, the chickens roosting peacefully, the world quiet and still. Inside the cabin, a small family huddled close to the fire, safe and loved, and finally, completely home. 1 year later, the valley had transformed in ways both subtle and profound. The cabin now boasted the addition Blackstone had promised: a proper kitchen with shelves lined with preserves Emma had put up during the summer harvest. Jars of pickled vegetables, fruit preserves, and dried herbs stood in neat rows, their contents glowing like jewels in the afternoon light. The garden had expanded threefold, producing more vegetables than they could eat, enough to trade with neighboring homesteaders who had slowly begun settling the surrounding valleys. The corral held 6 horses now, including 2 colts born that spring, their coats glossy and their spirits high. The chicken flock had doubled in size, and Emma had even acquired 3 goats whose milk she used to make cheese that neighboring families praised effusively. Dawn had grown into a sturdy toddler with her father's dark eyes and her mother's determined chin. She took her first steps on a warm May morning, lurching forward 3 unsteady paces before falling into Blackstone's waiting arms. Emma had cried with joy, capturing the moment in her memory like a pressed flower, something to be treasured forever. Now Dawn ran everywhere on chubby legs, chasing chickens and laughing at the wind, speaking a mixture of English and Comanche words that delighted both her parents. She had Blackstone's fearless nature and Emma's curiosity, a combination that kept them both constantly vigilant and endlessly entertained. Emma stood at the window watching her daughter play in the yard under Blackstone's watchful eye. Dawn was attempting to braid flowers together the way she had seen her mother do, though her small fingers fumbled with the stems more than succeeded. Blackstone sat nearby mending a bridle, but his attention never strayed far from their daughter. Emma's hand rested on her belly, which had begun to swell again with their second child. This pregnancy felt easier than the first, perhaps because she knew what to expect, or perhaps because she felt so completely secure in the life they had built. There was no fear this time, only anticipation and joy. Blackstone had been overjoyed at the news, though his protectiveness had returned in full force, insisting she rest more and work less. A wagon appeared on the ridge, and Emma recognized it immediately. Samuel Garrett had written that he would visit this month, and he was a man of his word. She called out to Blackstone, who scooped up Dawn and walked toward the approaching wagon, the toddler giggling and pulling at his hair. By the time Garrett pulled to a stop near the cabin, Emma had come outside to greet him, wiping her flour-dusted hands on her apron. "You are looking well," Garrett said, climbing down with a grunt and eyeing Emma's rounded belly with approval. "Seems like this valley agrees with you both. And this little one has grown like a weed," he added, reaching out to tickle Dawn's chin. She squealed and hid her face against Blackstone's shoulder. "It does," Emma agreed warmly. "Come inside. I have coffee ready and bread fresh from the oven. I also made that apple butter you liked so much last time." They settled around the table, Dawn perched on Blackstone's lap and playing with a wooden horse he had carved for her. The craftsmanship was exquisite, each detail carefully rendered, the mane textured and the legs perfectly proportioned. Garrett accepted a thick slice of bread spread with butter and took a bite, closing his eyes in appreciation. "You have become quite the homesteader, Emma. This bread is better than anything my cook makes." After they had eaten and exchanged news about the ranch and mutual acquaintances, Garrett's expression turned more serious. He pulled out a thick envelope and slid it across the table to Emma. "That women's organization in Denver, the one you spoke to last year? They have been busy. They published your story in a pamphlet and distributed it across 3 territories. The response has been significant, more than anyone anticipated." Emma opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside were dozens of letters, all addressed to her. From women thanking her for her courage and sharing their own stories of survival. From organizations requesting her guidance on how to help women escape dangerous situations. From lawyers offering pro bono services to women in situations similar to what she had endured. There was also a check, payment for her story and the rights to continue publishing it. More money than Emma had ever seen at one time. Her eyes widened as she took in the amount. "They want you to speak again," Garrett continued, watching her reaction carefully. "Not just in Denver, but in Santa Fe, Albuquerque, maybe even San Francisco. They are calling you an advocate, a voice for the voiceless. Women are traveling hundreds of miles just to hear you speak." It is powerful work, Emma. Important work that is changing lives and changing laws. Emma looked at Blackstone, who was watching her with quiet pride. She could see in his eyes that he already knew what she was thinking, what she was feeling. What do you think? I think you have found your purpose beyond these valley walls, Blackstone said carefully, choosing his words with deliberation. And I think you should pursue it with my full support. We will manage. Red Owl has offered to stay during the times you travel, and Dawn and I will be fine. She needs to see her mother doing important work in the world, to understand that women have power and voices that matter. Garrett cleared his throat, pulling another paper from his coat pocket. There is more. The territorial governor heard about what happened with Rake and the outlaws, about how Blackstone intervened and how you both have been helping women escape dangerous situations. He wants to offer Blackstone a position as a territorial marshal, specifically working to protect women and children from trafficking and abuse. The pay is good, better than most marshal positions, and it would give you both legal authority to do this work on a larger scale. You would have the power to make arrests, to investigate claims, to shut down operations that prey on the vulnerable. Blackstone sat very still, processing this information. Emma could see the wheels turning in his mind, considering the implications from every angle. A Comanche marshal. That would be unprecedented. There are men who would refuse to recognize my authority, who would see it as an insult. There are always men like that, Garrett said bluntly. But times are changing, slowly but surely. Your reputation precedes you, Blackstone. People know you are fair and brave and incorruptible. The governor believes you would be perfect for this role, and he has the political capital to make it stick. He is willing to fight for the appointment. Blackstone looked at Emma, then down at Dawn, who had fallen asleep in his arms, her small hand still clutching the wooden horse. I need time to think about it, to discuss it with my wife. This would change everything about our lives, about the peace we have worked so hard to build. Take all the time you need, Garrett said. The offer stands whenever you are ready. But I will say this, you two have something rare. You have survived hell and come out the other side stronger, wiser, more compassionate. That experience, that perspective, it could save lives. It could change the entire territory for the better that evening. After Garrett had departed and Dawn was sleeping peacefully in her cradle, her breathing soft and steady, Emma and Blackstone sat on the porch watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. The air was cool and pleasant, carrying the scent of pine and wildflowers. Do you want to accept the governor's offer? Emma asked quietly, her hand finding his in the darkness. Part of me does. The work would be meaningful, protecting others the way I once protected you. Giving voice and power to those who have been silenced and rendered powerless. But another part of me wants to stay here, in this valley, raising our children in peace, tending our land, living simply without the weight of the world pressing down on us, Blackstone admitted. What do you want? Emma considered carefully before responding, watching the stars multiply overhead like silver seeds scattered across dark soil. I want both. I want this valley to remain our home, our sanctuary, the place we return to when the world becomes too much. But I also want to use what we have learned, what we have survived, to help others who are still trapped in the darkness we escaped. Perhaps we can do both. Perhaps we travel when needed but always return here, to this place that is ours, that no one can take from us. Blackstone pulled her close, his arm around her shoulders, his warmth seeping into her. Then that is what we will do. We will build a life that encompasses both peace and purpose. We will raise our children to understand that safety is precious, but service to others is noble. And we will always come home to each other. This valley will be our anchor, the place that holds us steady no matter how far we roam. Emma leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steadiness that had become her anchor in every storm. She thought about the terrified woman she had been just 2 years ago, bound and sitting on the steps of a trading post in Bitter Springs, believing her life was over, that she had no value beyond what men decided to place on her. That woman could never have imagined this future, this happiness, this sense of belonging and purpose. That woman had been so small, so defeated, so certain that nothing good would ever touch her life again. "I love you," she whispered, the words still feeling new and precious every time she spoke them, as if they might disappear if she did not handle them carefully. "And I love you," Blackstone replied, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "You are the only face I wanted forever, and I was right. You are everything I needed, everything I did not know I was searching for." In the distance, a coyote called out to the rising moon, its voice haunting and beautiful. The valley lay peaceful and protected, cradled by hills that had witnessed their transformation from broken strangers into a family bound by choice and love and daily commitment. Inside the cabin, Dawn stirred in her sleep, murmuring something incomprehensible, and soon there would be another child. Another life brought into this sanctuary they had created from nothing but determination and hope. Emma closed her eyes and breathed in the night air, crisp and clean and full of promise. She had been captured and tied as payment to bandits, marked for a fate worse than death, treated as nothing more than a commodity to settle a debt. But someone had dragged her out of that darkness and whispered words that changed everything. "Don't look back," he had said. And she never had. Instead, she had looked forward, toward light and possibility and a future worth fighting for. And in doing so, she had found not just survival, but a life rich with meaning, purpose, and a love that would endure whatever challenges the world chose to throw at them. She had discovered her own strength, her own voice, her own power to shape not just her destiny, but the destinies of others still suffering. The stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, indifferent and eternal. But here in this small valley, on this particular piece of earth, two people who had been deemed worthless by a cruel world had proven that worth was not assigned by others but claimed by oneself. They had built something beautiful from the ashes of their pain, and it would stand as testament to the truth that no one, no matter how broken or discarded, is beyond redemption and renewal. Tomorrow would bring new decisions, new challenges, new opportunities to serve and protect others still trapped in darkness. There would be difficult conversations about balancing their quiet life with public service, about how to keep their children safe while doing dangerous work, about how to maintain their peace while confronting the ugliness that still existed in the world. But tonight, they simply sat together in peace. Two souls who had found each other against impossible odds and chosen, every single day, to keep choosing each other. And that, more than anything else, more than the work they would do or the lives they would save or the legacy they would leave, was enough.
Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.